question may be, as we consider loving like the Master, what does that mean? Perhaps the question is, what is love? Have just a brief 2 paragraphs here I want to read. Throughout human existence, love has always been the subject of countless books, poems, and here they say movies. Now, I'm not sure, movies are fairly recent. I'm not sure that goes back into human existence. But anyway, whatever the medium, one thing's for sure, society is obsessed with the idea of love with all its benefits and imperfections. In the past decades, we have come to view love as the end-all, be-all of humanity, the coveted goal of human existence. Movies tell us that love is the cure to any and all maladies. Books spin a tale of a whirlwind romance. Countless songs have been made about finding the one. And stopping there, does this writer have any idea of what love is? No. And it is a perplexing question for the unbeliever. It is perplexing for us as believers at times as well, because of the complexity of the thing of what the Bible calls love. The intensity of it, the demands of it, the rewards of it, and the pain of it. I want to begin with where I left off. And the challenge I left with you. What do you think? Am I a missionary? We're going to pick that up and carry it on further. Just again, that reminder of, as the question of, am I a missionary? Again, reminding us, a missionary is someone with a mission. A mission is a specific task I have been given to do. Do we tend to think of the word missionary in that light? Or do we tend to think of it someone out there, over there, somewhere? But you see, when you consider carefully what missionary stands for, who of us can say we're not a missionary? A missionary is someone with a mission. A mission is a specific task I've been given to do. Jesus said, "Go and make disciples in all nations." Are we missionaries if we're out there somewhere? Or isn't that actually what it means? That's true, but is that all it is? Have you been given a mission by Christ? How many here have been given a mission? What does it make you? A missionary. Let's begin with the question of what is love? John 3, and I'll just read verses 16 and 17. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. For God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. For God so what? That he gave his only begotten Son. Mark 12, starting at verse 28. And one of the scribes came, and having heard them reasoning together, And perceiving that he had answered them well, asked him, which is the first commandment of all? And Jesus answered him, the first of all the commandments is, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment. And the second is like, namely this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. There is none other commandment greater than these. And some translations and other texts would say, on these hang all the prophets, the commandments. The question, again, is, what is love? I'm not sure if any of us have heard of a man called Father Damien. His cassock was worn and weighted, his hair tumbled like a schoolboy's, his hands stained and hardened by toil, but the glow of health in his face, the buoyancy of youth in his manner, while his ringing laugh, his ready sympathy, and his inspiring magnetism told of one who is in any sphere might do a noble work, and who in that which he has chosen is doing among the noblest of all works. This is Father Damien. No person is as central to the history of Kalawa, which is an island in Hawaii, as Joseph de Veuster, or he is best known to the world as Father Damien. And what this island was is all the people with Hansen's disease were rounded up and placed there. Hansen's disease is leprosy. Pretty much they shipped them to this island to die. That's what was done. Father Damien felt such compassion for the lepers that he went there and then he asked to stay there permanently. He cared for the people's physical, emotional, and spiritual needs. Damien also appealed to the Hawaiian government for money and services to help the lepers of Molokai. Soon a school, homes, and an orphanage and a church greatly improved the colony through his efforts. Most importantly, he helped his people know that God loved and cared for them. He lived there for 12 years when it finally happened that he had contracted Hansen's disease. Although the disease is not highly contagious, Damien had not been careful enough about hygiene. Over the years, he had done nothing to separate himself from his people. He dipped his fingers in the poi bowl shared with other patients. He shared his pipe. He did not always wash his hands after bandaging open sores. Damien was 49 years old when he died April 15th of 1889. And he wrote to his brother, shortly before his death, he wrote to his brother, I am gently going to my grave. It is the will of God, and I thank him very much for letting me die of the same disease and in the same way as my lepers. I am very satisfied and happy. The question I'm asking is, what is love? Let's define it with some definitions. 1, to hold dear, to cherish. 2, unselfish loyal and benevolent concern for the good of another. That's pretty much what you'll find if you look at the dictionary. If we go a little further, we'll find that love conveys something a little more, especially if we look at Scripture. First is God always refers to love as a commitment, a choice, and an action. Love is never referred to as a state, which would mean a condition or stage of something. We'll find in Scripture, furthermore, that love is the means by which something is done that personalizes and increases the effectiveness of an action. Speaking the truth. Someone finish it? In love. So it states there it's possible to speak the truth not in love. We're to speak the truth in love. Where does love, as we know it as Christians, originate from? God is love. God is love. He's the essence of what love is. How important is love? Why do I have a picture of Elmer's glue? Now, I know that's not the best glue, but it serves the purpose. How important is love? It's the comprehensive principle of relationships that defines how we serve others. It's a central theme of the Old Testament. Now, we tend not to think of the Old Testament as a theme of love. We think law. But yet, all that was given because of love. It's a central theme of the Old Testament law and the gospel. But it's most pronounced and seen clearly within the gospel. And I want us to think of something here. Legalism is the pursuit of right that lacks love for God and others. Love is the core upon which, or that holds all the Old Testament and the New Testament together. Love the Lord your God with all thy heart, soul, and mind. First and foremost. Secondly, flowing out of that is a love for others. Everything in the Old Testament law has to do with that, is what Jesus is saying. Is it important to love because God is love, or because it's a basic human need? What do you think? I want us to think carefully here. God is love. Love is of God. In Scripture, the focus of love is who? God. When love is reduced to a basic human need, is the focal point still God? It is not. When love is reduced to a basic human need, the focal point becomes man, and God is moved to the fringes. Now, I'm not saying that love is not the means by which much is provided that aids in the development and quality of life of us as human beings. But when it becomes a need, love is now dependent on man and his ability to reciprocate it. In other words, if I need love and you're unable to love me, we got a problem. Because love is based upon my ability to love you is based upon your ability to love me. Can you love me? Yes and no. Love is love only when it's centered on God and others are the beneficiary. In other words, when I love God with all my heart, soul, and mind, out of that flows a love for others. They benefit, but they benefit only because I'm focusing on loving God. And in my love for God, I seek ways to serve others. And what you have within the emphasis or the need for love is just a subtle reversal of the emphasis. When we study Scripture carefully, what we'll find out is the action of love is always a way. For God so loved the world that he gave. Was it towards him or away from him? The action of love, when you study 1 Corinthians 13, is always a way to you. And as you love God, the action of your love comes this way. And within that, you have the fullness of love. But the focus is not on you loving me. The focus is on how I can love you. And now that breaks down when a person does not reciprocate. But it's in that moment that as we focus on loving God, that we can continue to love effectively. Thirdly, what is the goal of love? I got a pin here, and I am not fond of pins. My sisters discovered at an early age it's a way to motivate me. The focus or the goal of love is provoking the spiritual betterment of an individual via the means of my personal active serving of them. Now, pins can provoke. I remember years ago, I was visiting my parents. We had a number of young children. And we were just chatting there, and my dad was on the chair kind of dozing and stuff. And all of a sudden, there was a horrible bellow from over in that corner. And no one knew what was going on. And we were trying to figure out what was happening. And he said, someone stuck a pin in my foot. They provoked him. I guess they wanted to see, it was my wife's children. They wanted to see as to what would happen if a pin was inserted in a heel. They provoked him. We don't think of love as provoking, but the reality is, love, properly handled, provokes to good. That's the goal of love. It's to provoke the spiritual betterment of an individual via the means of my personal act of service and serving them. What is the action of love? I already mentioned it. Is that balloon coming closer or going away? I remember, again, years ago, we had been somewhere, I guess it was to the doctor, and that always was a cause for some balloons. Especially we went to the clinic for special children at Strasbourg. They had balloons, and they hopped out of the van, and guess what happened? One of them let go of a balloon. What happened to that balloon? The last I saw it was going higher. It was going away. The action of love is always away. Of God's love is always away. It is a constant, controlled, deliberate action that flows away from me. I'm actively loving others. And we see that in the life of Christ. Repeatedly, again and again. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth on him should not perish, but have everlasting life. What is the price of love? Desires, things I want from you, your acceptance, your love, appreciation. We could add quite a bit. Another, perhaps, dreams and goals, things I hope to accomplish. Maybe a nice house, successful business. You guys who are under a big buck, and the list can go on and on. Good health, etc. Expectations, the things you should do for me and how I want you to do them, kind of wrapped up in the bundle of expectations. Respect, a spouse showing affection, etc., on and on. See, which direction are those things coming? Or the emphasis or focus of those things? I want these things from you. Think about love, what love does. If I love, what must I do to all those things? Let go of them. It doesn't mean I won't experience them, but it means my focus is not on receiving them. Because love, the action of love is always away from me. If you want to, let's consider this yet. What did it cost Jesus? Everything. Everything. If you go into the Bible and study the topic of self-denial, what will you study? Has everybody ever done that? How much in the Scripture, how much does the Scripture speak about self-denial, of what it looks like? We see glimpses of it, but we don't find detailed explanations of self-denial in of itself, do we? We do, but it's in different language. Study 1 Corinthians 13. If we're going to understand self-denial, what we have to do is study love. Because what you'll find in 1 Corinthians 13 is that love is the outworking of me loving you, is me practicing self-denial. You're not going to find a lot of scripture detailing what self-denial is. Okay, if we focus on self-denial, we end up with asceticism. But if we're going to focus on love, we will deny ourselves. But self-denial is not the focus. Love is. It cost Christ everything. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. He left the glories of heaven for what? A cursed cross and a cursed death. He who created the world. It cost him everything. But he gained everything. And he gained you and I. What does love do? Let's consider a number of things love does briefly. Love takes an interest in people. In John chapter 4, the woman at the well, what did Jesus do? Did he take an interest in her? He did. For God so loved the world that he gave. In Ephesians 4:15, love guides the expression of truth. You know, as a husband, I know I have to be careful how I answer this question. Do I look fat? One of the worries a wife may have. What if she is fat? Okay. You follow the predicament? How does love answer that question? You see, love will take that cold, hard truth and remold it into an answer that is considerate of the person. John 17. As Jesus prayed for the disciples, he was interceding on their behalf. Love intercedes for the ones that are loved. As Jesus was being tried, Peter betrayed him. He denied him. Yet we see that Christ forgave him, did he not? And restored him. Love forgives those who hurt or betray us. Matthew 19:14, as the mothers brought their children to Christ, the disciples said, "Get out of here, move it on, out." Jesus said, no. Let the little children come unto me. Such is the kingdom of heaven. Love listens. James chapter 1. Be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. Love listens. But it also then responds appropriately. Jesus took them on, if I remember correctly, he would have blessed them. He took time for them. Last, and this is not a full list, just a couple things touching on, because I want to get into what love looks like. Is love is moved by the eternal destiny of a person. Again, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whomsoever believeth in him should not perish, but have eternal life. Maybe I don't know what love is either. Maybe each one of us has a lot of room to grow in what love is, in the application of it. As we look at loving like the Master, we're going to shift into disciple making. And there's two areas that we're going to look at. The first here is in the home. Remember in my first topic I said we have home, community, and abroad. I'm speaking to most men here who are fathers, I'm assuming, or perhaps grandfathers. So I'm going to look at two mission fields. We're going to look at the mission field of the home, and we're going to look at the mission field outside of the home. Or, more so, shift into the larger workings of the church and disciple making, which then includes the home, the community, and the world. But as we consider the home, Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. Listen, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord alone. You must love the Lord with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. And you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I'm giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you're at home and when you're on the road, when you're going to bed and when you're getting up. Tie them to your hands and wear them on your foreheads as reminders. Write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. Ironically, the Jews took this literal. They had the phylacteries. They had the different things they did to obey this. But unfortunately, they missed the main portion of it. That is actually, love the Lord thy God with all your heart and teach your children. You must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands. In other words, there he's emphasizing the heart and our application of these personally and inwardly. But as we look at the home, several things. First is reaching the heart of your child. Now, this is not a foolproof formula. A person may effectively reach their child's heart, and they still turn away. After all, we have to remember to follow the Lord is a choice. And we don't know what they will do. But in reaching the heart of a child in particular, you need to take time for them. Kyler, who's 12 years old, has decided this year he wants to do trapping. We're going to do some trapping this winter. Our youngest daughter, Malia, loves playing games. Reaching their hearts, we have to take time for them. We have to listen to them. In other words, I've listened much and talked little. We need to learn to know them, what they like, what they don't like, what their strengths are, their weaknesses, what offends them, what they believe, what they think. And some of the ways of finding this out is by asking them advice. What should I do with this? What do you think we should do? And within that as well as ask them what you have done to them that has been hurtful, that has been difficult, or that they did not appreciate. Also within that of reaching the heart of the child, it is important to acknowledge our failures. Now, something that just within this is the Snyders and the Weavers are a family that does have their opinions. I'm a Snyder and my wife's a Weaver. And we have children, and they get opinions from both sides. And they're free to share them. So what happens if I give instructions and it doesn't align with their opinion? And they don't just take it and do it. And Dad gets upset. One of the ways to reach the heart is to acknowledge that and say, I'm sorry. And shaping the heart of the child, remember, this is evangelism and discipling. This is a mission field. How often do we think of, as we look at young people who have not given their heart to the Lord within our churches as unbelievers? If they have not made a commitment to the Lord, they are an unbeliever. I don't care how cultured they are. They're an unbeliever, and we have to view them as such. We need to evangelize them. And that's what we're doing here, is we're evangelizing. And also within that, as we work in evangelizing, preparing to disciple. As we think of shaping the heart of a child, one of the things that we constantly have to be focused on is, how can I teach this child about God? And it is important that we teach them to view God apart from us. In other words, I cannot present an accurate view of God to them, of myself. I need to take them to something outside of me, and that is God's Word. We can point them to creation, different things like that. And so within that, as we develop or seek to develop a view of God, we ask what they think. We have numerous discussions on creation and evolution at times. Discuss things with them. And shaping the heart as well is resolving problems together. We have a couple dogs, and somehow our dogs always know when there's a planned vacation or holiday. Either they're having puppies or they just had puppies. And when your family lives 7 hours away, how do you work this out? And these are discussions that we've often had. What should we do? So in other words, within this, well, what do you think? What do you think we should do? Hear each person out. What are their thoughts? Try to understand why they think what they think. And try within that to, okay, well, why do you believe that? Or what are the principles that guide that? And just sort through that. In other words, what we're doing here is we're shaping them. Teaching. Apart from discipline. Okay, when I'm talking about teaching, I'm not talking about discipline. Be opportunistic. You know, my boys, and I help some with it too, have honeybees. I am intrigued with honeybees. They're interesting insects. We have numerous discussions with honeybees just within the argument of evolution and observing the function of a hive and how dependent that hive is on everything functioning as it is, and how that refutes evolution. Opportunities, weeds. Compare weeds to something. What is a weed? It's any plant that's growing out of place. A soybean in a cornfield is a weed. A corn stalk in a soybean field is a weed. That presents some interesting opportunities for teaching and kind of drawing and illustrating biblical principles. Thirdly, passing on our faith. Story here, it's titled Truth or Fiction. There's a tale told of the great English actor Macready. An eminent preacher once said to him, "I wish you would explain something to me." "What is it? And I don't know that I can't explain anything to a preacher." "What is the reason for the difference between you and me? You're appearing before crowds night after night with fiction, and the crowds come wherever you go. I am preaching the essential and unchangeable truth, and I'm not getting any crowd at all." Macready's answer was this. This is quite simple. "I can tell you the difference between us. I present my fiction as though it were truth, and you present your truth as though it were fiction." Within that, as we consider passing on the faith, what was he doing? One of the things is he put himself into it. There was passion there. The investing of himself in what he was doing brought it to life. And if we're going to pass on our faith to our children, or the faith that God has given us to our children, we have to be passionate about it. Yeah, this is so exciting. Jesus came to earth and died so that I might live. Oh. Who wants that? Do we have something to give? And if we do, why don't we get excited about it? Is it exciting to read the Word? Is it exciting to uncover little nuggets that you read yesterday and forgot in the meantime? Maybe you don't, but I do. Do you get what I'm saying? We can get excited and all worked up over a picture off a trail camera, but try to translate that to something that's going to take us into eternity forever. We can't get excited about that too often. And then we expect our children to be excited about what we believe and what God has to offer. We're missing something. Be consistent. If it's good for the goose, it's also good in the goslings, it's good for the gander. Get them involved in discussions. Talk about predestination. Again, now I'm just saying talk about it. You can't pick up a book from Protestant or Baptist theologies that don't include that. What is predestination? What is eternal security? Or is there such a thing? Okay, you get what I'm saying. Discuss these things. Help them understand text that presents some of these things. And we don't have time to get into that, but one of the things that is important to us when we look at some of the texts that speak of predestination, we can't just dismiss it. We have to say, okay, what is it there and what does it mean? It's in the Bible. We have to understand as to what is a biblical understanding of predestination. Those are difficult subjects. It means we have to study, we have to know. But we can present them in a way that fits Scripture soundly and gives allowance and recognizes man's free choice. Hear out their thinking and beliefs. Sometimes a child will tell you, or a teenager will tell you some things of what he believes. And I tell you what, the left knee's on the right side of the right knee. I mean, we're just not sure where to go with this stuff. It scares us half to death. And the next minute, we're impressed by their maturity. Hear them out. And think out responses biblically and carefully. Fourthly, in sending them out. How do we do that? There's ways we can do it. Our children through the years, we have children ranging from the age of about 26 to 9. 25, 26 to 9 years old. I forget exactly how old Caitlin is. I think she just turned 26, if I remember correctly. One of the things they've done through the years have been grown pumpkins. It's their job to weed them. They got to mulch them. They got to take care of them. They got to spray them. If we're spraying, if they need sprayed, they got to pick them. And then they can sell them. What does that have to do with sending them out? It's preparing them for greater and bigger projects. Observe and give advice. Allow them to struggle with it. Allow them to fail. And then help them understand why it failed or why it didn't work out. Encourage them to do small ministry projects. Not all hobbies have to be recreational. Hunting, fishing, etc. We can have hobbies that are ministry projects, helping others. Let's move into the church. Disciple making in the church. And one of the things here I'm going to just point to briefly is some concerns I have at times about the emphasis on the model church of Acts 3 through 7. Now, one of the things I want to say within this is I'm not saying we cannot learn from them, but many times I think we can raise the church in that text to a level that makes them inhuman or unhuman. And when that happens, we've got some major problems. Think about the church. We need to perfectly follow them. In essence, we idolize them. There is much we can learn from the church in Scripture. They have some advantages that we don't have, but we also have advantages that they didn't have. We have to remember that. Within this church, it was a normal church. They had liars. They had marginalized people. They had people pleasers. Oh, am I reading a different text? Ananias and Sapphira were in the church. They were liars. They lied. The Grecians had a great complaint with the church. Why? Because the rest of the church wasn't taking care of them. They were ignoring them. When it became aware of it, they applied a solution to it. Peter, at one point, had to be admonished by Paul severely because he refused to associate with the Gentiles. And one of the problems, the concerns I have with overemphasizing or lifting the church there too highly is that idolizing promotes an overly critical spirit of the good things a church may have. And ends up resulting in throwing everything away. It attacks good people in the process and contradicts the very ideas they're promoting about what the church should be. Again, I'm not saying we cannot learn much from them. They are an example for us. But we have to remember that they were distinctly human, which meant they encountered or struggled with many of the problems that we struggle with today. But we can learn a lot from them. Just something to remind us as we look within Scripture so frequently. So many Bible figures, we put them on the pedestal up here, and we fail to recognize their humanity. And within that, then we have a distorted perspective of them, and we can do the same with the early church. We must be careful. But again, we can learn much from them. It's good to study them as to how they applied biblical principles to the present cultural issues that they encountered. Myths about mentoring. Now I want you to, as we think about mentoring, we think about the church and disciple making, there's some myths that are out there. Mentors must be older. Doesn't look like the people in this picture are older. Mentors must be perfect. By the way, I'm going to go home. If mentors have to be perfect, I'm done. Mentors must have all the answers. Means they must have degrees, all kinds of training. That's not what we find scripturally. Every one of us is called to this role in some way. Another myth is it's their sole responsibility to hold the mentee, the one being mentored, accountable. We cannot do that. We can set up the structure, but if the person does not hold themselves accountable, there's nothing we can do to hold them accountable, or there's limited what we can do, except use appropriate discipline, even within church settings. Mentoring is only for people with problems. Well, yeah, it is, because we all got problems, whether you like it or not. I'm sorry if you didn't realize that before. I feel bad breaking that to you, but we got problems. Mentoring is for people with problems, and it's for all of us. The mentor is being mentored when he's mentoring. That sounds contradictory, but I can't tell you how many times as I worked with people that as I worked with them, I saw things that I needed to work with, but it also helped me understand things more fully as well. So within that, now that we have the myths out of the way, let's think about the characteristics of a teaching church. And here, I have a question. Which picture best represents a teaching church? Why did you pick that one?
The other's just a building.
The other's just a building. And the other is someone, I'm assuming a sister helping a smaller sister. And I'm assuming there's mentoring going on there. Now, it may not be in spiritual things, but it's in teaching her how to put on a boot. Oh, no, that's not how you do it. You do it this way. That's mentoring. In a general sense. So from here on, you're going to see the picture of the two girls, because that is what a teaching church looks like. A teaching church practically applies 2 Timothy 3:16 and 17. All Scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness. And very briefly, just touching on this. Doctrine is Bible truth. In other words, as Scripture is given, is profitable for doctrine, it means that it's good for doctrine. And from that doctrine, it also gives some instruction as to what it looks like. If you want to understand what love looks like, read Leviticus. You said, what? The law? Does love steal? If I love someone, will I steal their car? Their horse? Will I? No. So we develop applications from doctrine. Reproof helps to identify what is wrong, and it calls sin, sin. In 2020, the activities in Seattle and a number of cities throughout the U.S., were they peaceful protests or sinful actions? I just burned down the neighbor's store. That's loving, isn't it? Do you get what I'm saying? Reproof says, wait a minute, this is wrong. Love doesn't do that. Correction tells us when we are wrong. And so we see that reproof and correction can overlap. It tells us when we're wrong. You know, we have a number of sons. Some are in their 20s into their upper teens. And I don't know how you find boys, but I find at times that, well, it's not just them, but they're kind of at each other, or they're boogering, one's boogering the other about something, and then the other one turns around and gives something back, and we kind of have something called, it's like an escalator. It just goes higher and higher and higher and gets nastier and nastier and nastier. And it's dad's job to say, okay, wait a minute here. Something's wrong. Are you being kind to each other? Was that kind? That's wrong. That's not how God calls you to act. Instruction teaches us how to do what is right. Just recently, we have a honey warmer. My one son, Taylor, built it. And the other day I walked into the garage and I noticed the temperature in the warmer was only like 101 degrees. And I said, that's odd. So I checked the probe, and here the probe wasn't in far enough. This thing has like 2 inches of insulation, and the probe is just to be just inside the insulation. And I slid the probe in to where it was supposed to be, and when it hit 120 degrees, I pulled the top off. Thankfully, it wasn't in real long, because the goal of raw honey is you want to keep it between the temperature, or if you're heating it to get rid of the crystals, you don't want it higher than about 110 degrees. And so later I said, hey, did you check that thing last evening? Did you watch it a while when you put it in? And they said, no. So, well, we need to. We got to make sure that probe is just at the right spot so that this doesn't happen. That's instruction. We do that in spiritual things as well. A teaching church consists of 4 things. And Joshua 24, Joshua says this: choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. So within a teaching church, there are 4 elements that have to be present in order for it to be a teaching church. One is you have to have committed families. We will serve the Lord. From that, there needs to be committed leaders. We see that with Joshua. He said, I'm serving the Lord. The response of the Israelites to them was, we're too. Within that, then, we have to have committed mentors, those who are committed to ministering to others. While we're all called, there are those who are about more gifted. We see that scripturally. And fourthly, there has to be a committed congregation. And so within the function of a teaching church, we'll begin with committed families. Fathers, committed families are headed up by fathers who are actively leading and mentoring. They're pursuing their children. They're doing things together with them. They're observing them. They're giving them things to do and observing how they do that. They're also trying to learn from failed interactions or where we fail as to what triggers a child, what their weaknesses are, what their desires are, the things that make them tick. A committed father is teaching and living the truth. He's giving and accepting reproof. Do your children feel safe answering the question, have I done anything that hurt you recently? Have your responses been such as that they can freely answer that question? Committed fathers have established a personal and a family altar. Within a committed family are committed mothers who are actively filling their role. A committed family is also actively involved in church functions. Doesn't mean we have to be there every time, but we're active in it. And they're serving within their capabilities. Also within the function of a teaching church is committed leaders. One of the things we have to remember is we can only help those who want help. We can't help someone who does not want help. It's impossible. We can continue pursuing them, but we cannot help them if they are not interested in help. A committed leader is keenly aware of his own need. He knows his weaknesses. He's able to hear those who are pointing out or reveal things that they need to grow in. A committed leader pleads with God for wisdom and strength. Also, a committed leader observes his congregation. They do monitor, and I think we do well to monitor church attendance. You know, I'd be in trouble. I know the last, September there for a stretch, I think I personally myself was not at church for 5 Sundays. But one was a family get-together, family camping. Another time I have a mom who has Alzheimer's, and so I try to travel infrequently to help take care of her for a weekend. We have a daughter living in Wytheville, Virginia. We're down there for a weekend. Always in church, but not at home. But a committed leader is aware of that. No, a committed leader also listens to Sunday school discussions. You know, Sunday school discussions can be very revealing about a person. I hope you aren't afraid to speak up in Sunday school. They pay attention to pursuits and interest. What is the point? It's not to, it's just to understand another congregation. They seek feedback from their congregation, as well as every once in a while can check in and see how things are going. Committed leaders teach biblical truths and doctrines. They confront sin and practice church discipline when needed. Failing with sin hinders the church. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 5:6, a little leaven leavens the whole loaf. He says you have to deal with sin. If sin is not dealt with, the church as a whole suffers. Committed leader involves others. Is involved in the lookouts, is always on the lookout for leadership potential. Perhaps church leadership establishes small groups And within that, there's accountability. And perhaps if a small group leader becomes aware of someone who's struggling spiritually, they can bring it to the attention of the church. Establish accountability groups for those who need accountability. If you want to understand accountability or find a good book on accountability, Heath Lambert's Finally Free lays out accountability very well. Accountability is not a babysitting session. Accountability is the responsibility of the person being held accountable. If someone comes to you and says, I've been struggling morally, I want you to hold me accountable. Should you call them or should they call you? If they are unwilling to call you, they are not willing to be accountable. Accountability only operates when the person who seeks accountability holds themselves accountable and makes them accountable to you. If you got to go fishing all the time, you're not going to get anywhere, or it's going to be really slow. Church discipline is an important tool within accountability structures. Perhaps a church, if they see a need, can establish a mentoring program. It can be a formal or informal program. Do we need it structured or not as structured? Will mentors be chosen or will they volunteer? Will mentees be selected proactively or reactively? In other words, a plan set up for when the need arises. Who directs the program? Who does a mentor report to? What materials will we use? That's important. Currently, or last time, I don't know how many years ago, I'd heard that at that point in time, this was maybe 6-8 years ago, there were 800 counseling theologies, philosophies in the United States of America. That's a lot of philosophies. So good materials are essential. Some materials that can be very helpful in something like this is Instruments in the Redeemer's Hands, How People Change, Competent to Counsel. One of the most important ones I find is a good Bible study help. And what I mean by that is a book like How to Study Your Bible. We carry one in the bookstore, Living by the Book. That is actually a college course, but outstanding in how it teaches simply basic Bible reading skills so that we can read Scripture and understand it. Just within a program structure, some churches will set up what will happen is the church leadership will establish a mentoring program. They'll have a coordinator in charge of who interacts with the mentors and also reports to the leadership. And then from that, they have mentors who work with clients. It doesn't have to be that way. But one of the things that I think we have to do and recognize is that as the church, the church does have the authority to develop something for a need. Tom mentioned that the church does have the authority to ordain deacons there in Acts to meet the need of the Grecians. We are called to mentor, to help one another, whether it's formal or informal. Ultimately, as we said before, it comes down to you as the person. I'm again going to summarize, but I want to call you to something. The question again, am I a missionary? We've settled that. Yes, you are. I want you to look. I'm going to read this. I want you to look at the last sentence. A missionary is someone with a mission. A mission is a specific task I've been given to do. Jesus said, "Go and make disciples in all nations," in Matthew 28:19a. I am determined to follow his example. That's for each of us. Are you determined? Are you committed to following Christ's example? To ministering, to love, to active love and service. You see what we're talking about within the home and the church. I'm not sure how many times I mentioned love, but very seldom. Were we talking about active love? Yes, we were. And that's what Christ did. And that's what we're called to do. To actively serve one another. To minister to one another. To build up the church. That together we can grow in love and we can reach the suffering, the struggling, and the lost. God bless.